Hey free-to-play gang, welcome back to another video. You are not ready for this. You are not ready. Okay, so a lot of you guys have heard of Bkorn being really good and you don't even know why she is that good. Yes, you know she has debuffs, you know she has damage that scales with debuffs, but you do not know to what extent, how powerful she is, and what her final multiplication can look like. It's insane. Everything that is coming from her own kit makes her deal an incredible amount of damage. I noticed that she does slightly more damage than Eternity, and I was super puzzled because Eternity just has higher resonance, better crit rate, better crit damage. What's happening? So let's go through Bkornblume for today's video, and we're gonna go through all of her skills, her insights, her portrays, and just taking a look at her skills in action as well. It's nuts. Alright, so anyway, let's start with her first skill, Watch Her Sleeves. Mass attack deals 135% reality damage to 2 enemies, and if the target is in any kind of stat down or any kind of debuff, this attack deals 30% more reality damage, right? It goes from 30% to 45%, all the way up to 75%. This is very huge. Now, reason for that is because she has another skill that applies debuffs. So she's instantly going to increase her own DPS, and at the same time, she's hitting multiple targets, right? So that's going to increase the DPS output by a lot. Now, her second skill, Prying Ear, mass debuff. All enemies suffer reality defense minus 15%, and damage taken increases by 15%. Lasts for 2 rounds. And this increases from 15% to 20%, all the way to 25%, which then lasts for 3 rounds. This is super good against bossing, by the way. Now we're going to end off with her ultimate here, Uninvited Reviewer. One single target attack deals 550% reality damage and inflicts seal for 3 rounds. Now the target is immune to seal, Moxie will then be reduced by 2 instead, which is really good because right now you are always guaranteed to ensure that the enemy will never ever use their ultimate. They're either sealed or they don't have full Moxie, right? But of course, as you can see on the screen, this is her ultimate with a level 1 Prying Ear, which is reduction of 15% reality defense and increased 15% damage taken. And this is everything. Level 3 Prying Ear and level 3 Sonato's buff, which increases my DPS output by another 25% on an enemy with typing disadvantage. So this is an insane amount of DPS. It's nuts, but this is not the main thing. But before we deep dive into some numbers, let's take a look at her insights first. Honestly, every time I say that, it just kind of sounds gross. Okay, so her insights. Number 1, when the enemy is in any kind of debuff, your damage dealt increases by another 20%. This is ridiculous because you're always going to be debuffing enemies, so your damage is always going to increase by 20%. Which also means that whenever you attack, you must always make sure that you have debuffs on the enemies first. But it's a good thing that her Prying Ear basic level 1 ability lasts for 2 rounds, so there is more than enough time for you to set up your attacks. Now, Insight 2, attack plus 5% when the caster enters battle, and Insight 3, when the caster is attacked by an enemy in some kind of debuff, the damage taken reduces by 20%. I think this is okay towards the end game, but it's not something that you need to urgently rush for. So her Insight 3 is, in my opinion, not the most urgent. Now let's take a look at her portrays, right? Her portrays are insane. So Uninvited Reviewer, this is the ultimate. Damage increases from 550% to 625%. That is a whopping, I don't know, about 15% damage increase or something like that. Now at Portray 2, her normal attacking skill will then have an increase in DPS. That's about it. And Portray 3 to 5, her ultimate damage increases from 550% all the way to 800%. This is huge. It's massive, dude. And now moving on to the Psychube preference, I am just using whatever that I have. So I am using his Bounded Duty on her primarily. I think this is great because she don't have a way to heal herself. So this is, in my opinion, perfect because she also does a lot of damage. She should be able to take out enemies easily along the way. And this will be able to top her off every once in a while. But one thing before we take a look at her numbers, please note that her critical technique is very low. You can see that critical technique is 176 as opposed to like Centurion with 500 plus. And what that essentially means is her critical rate is very low and the critical damage is also really low. So 176 gives you 5.9% crit rate and 8.8% crit damage. Let's take a look at Centurion, for example, right? So Centurion right now has 517 critical technique, which translates into 17.2% crit rate and 25.9% crit damage. This is whatever that she has at her base form. It's not boosted by anything. It's just whatever that she is naturally born with, which is honestly not that much. All the Centurion sims in the comments. Okay, so here are some ridiculous numbers. So here are the stats of my Bkorn, and some of you guys call her Korn, some of you call her Bkornblume. Anyway, just for a reference in case you need to refer. But let's take a look at her skills and her individual calculation. So this is her level 1 Watch Her Sleeve skill. Deals 135% damage to 2 enemies, and if the target is debuffed, you then increase your damage by another 30%. It is not a 1.3 times multiplier, so that means your multiplier goes from 135% to 165%. It is additive. So over here you can see that I have my base damage being 1753 against an elemental neutral enemy, and my damage goes up to 2245 against a positively attuned enemy or Afflator's damage, right? But you notice that the Afflator's multiplier is not 1.3, and the reason for that is because of reality defense difference. So this enemy over here has a lot more reality defense. That's the idea behind it. Now, I've also taken another screenshot of what happens when we land a crit. So you can see that my critical damage is not the same as whatever that I have, because my critical damage is supposed to be 144.8%, but the damage that I'm actually dealing is 1.405. And this could be because of critical defense stats that the enemies have. So do take note that there are all these confounding factors that's going to affect your DPS. And there is one thing called the damage ratio that I'm calculating over here. Essentially, I'm comparing these two numbers. The reason for that, we will find out in just a little bit. So the next skill that I wanted to test out is what happens when we use Prying Ear. So if you go back a little bit, you notice that I do not have any debuffs on the enemy. So this is just basic DPS, right? But if we include Prying Ear, things are big different. So the whole point of me calculating the damage ratio is just to confirm that there's some kind of defense in play. And lo and behold, that is true. Essentially, the damage ratio increased from 1.799 to 1.827. It's a little bit complicated for you, I kind of understand. All you need to know is that reality defense is at play. That's it. So earlier on, we calculated our base DPS to be 1753 without any debuffs. But if we have debuffs, our damage goes up to 2898 with just that one single skill. And that actually increased our DPS by 65.3%. With the addition of one single debuff. How stupid is that, right? Now the reason for that is because we have the debuff effect, we have the damage increase from her normal attack itself, and we also have an insight one which increases her DPS output by another 20%. It is so dumb. So the damage output goes up a lot whenever she drops her own debuffs. It's insane. So I went on to do a little bit more math. You don't really care too much about this, but the debuff damage, excluding the defense reduction and the damage increase coming from Prying Ear, the extra damage that she's dealing because there are debuffs, we don't care what debuffs, and because of her insight one, this is the calculation over here, she should be dealing 2571, which means the difference between 2898 and 2571 is the effect caused by Prying Ear. And you notice that the effect caused by Prying Ear is only increasing our DPS output by 12.7%, not 30%. Okay, take a look at Prying Ear again. Reality defense minus 15% and damage taken plus 15%. Most people will think that your damage is going to go up by 30%. That is not the case. Your damage is only going to go up in this one specific instance by 12.7%, and the reason for that is because of defense mechanics. If you want more detail, it's essentially the more damage you deal, the more damage is being reduced by defense stats. I've talked about this in a different video, but all in all, her DPS output jumps by a significant amount because of her own debuffs. But we can actually push this a lot further. So what happens when you use a level 3 Prying Ear comboed with a level 3 Watch Her Sleeves? The actual output is freaking insane, dude. The damage is completely nuts. So she did a critical hit of 9,352, and if you just reduce that back down to a base damage, which is 9,352 divided by 1.405, she should be dealing 6,656 damage thereabout, which is her non-crit DPS. So between that of her maximum non-crit DPS and her lowest damage possible, which is a level 1 skill without any debuffs, her damage output actually increases by a multiplier of 3.8 times. That is insane. There is so much jam-packed into her kit that allows her to maximize the DPS by such a great amount. So all in all, Bkorn is just extremely dumb. I did not expect her to perform so well. So not only is she a debuffer, but she does an incredible amount of DPS at the same time. And I think she just has a lot of longevity. But I know some of you guys might be saying, "Free-to-play, why do you just only do this right now? Why didn't you do the check earlier on? Now our banner is completely gone, so what can we do?" Okay, don't worry, I got your back. So if you take a look at the upcoming banners, don't worry, okay? She will come back very soon. So if we take a look at the Tooth Fairy banner, she is part of the Tooth Fairy banner, which is chef's kiss. I would highly recommend you to go for Tooth Fairy, and at the same time, if you get multiple copies of her, that is perfect, because then you have the chance to increase her ultimate DPS from 550% all the way to 800. She's freaking nuts, dude. This is definitely one of the best banners to look out for. Everything about this banner is just perfect. Okay, so anyway, that's it for this video. That is it for the Bkornblume highlight. You can see that I was just like testing more stuff as well. She is ridiculous. But if you have any other questions or you want me to cover other characters, feel free to let me know down in the comment section below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed today's content video. Don't forget to thumbs up, it really helps the channel, and subscribe for more Reverse 999 content. Now with that said, this has been very free to play, and as always, I will see you in the next video.